r/AskReddit. Divers and people who spend a lot of time underwater. What's the creepiest, most unexplainable thing you've seen while in the depths? I dive myself, but heard this story from a guarded diver. In 2010 a man took a test drive in a car with a salesman, and in a suicide attempt he drove the car off the pier into the sea and drowned. The salesman managed to escape by breaking the window and swimming to the surface. The divers were dispatched to retrieve the other man's body. This isn't in the news report, which I have a link to below for anyone interested. Simply through working in marinas at the time, I was able to be part of the conversation with the diver in question. When he got to the car, he said the man was still facing forward, hands on the steering wheel, eyes wide. He'd been there a couple of hours now. Where it gets creepy is when the diver opened the driver door. This combined with the smashed window caused the currents to flow through the car, and the man's wide-eyed head turned around slowly with the force of it to face the diver. I got told a story once by a Maori language teacher of mine during my time at high school. We didn't learn much Maori, just listened to stories. A dam in the Waikato, New Zealand had begun to have visible cracks in the concrete on the outside part of the dam, and some drivers were organized to dive down and check the inside submerged part of the dam for damage on that side. While they were down there was the usual debris you would find behind a man-made wall, which prevents the water from flowing as it would normally do if there wasn't a dam there. Turns out what they thought were large logs were in fact huge eels, which had gotten to the size of logs due to being prevented from migrating to the sea, where they breed and die. So from being prevented from doing their natural life duties, they just get larger and larger. That would be creepy, seeing eels deep down in the water just floating around. I had a dive master that told me once he was diving somewhere and found a full skeleton wearing diving gear with the air on the tank turned off pretty deep down. If I remember correctly, they said they reported it to the police, and it was found out the man's wife turned off his air while they were on a dive to murder him. A coworker of mine goes cave diving and says that, while not super common, you do find dead bodies in swim gear in caves sometimes. People either go too far into the cave and then run out of oxygen on the way back, or they squeeze past a tight gap and get stuck on the other side, unable to come back the way they came. You can dive in man-made lakes and check out what's left of old flooded homes and communities. It's pretty dark and spooky down there no matter what, especially when you think of all the big fish swimming around that are barely silhouettes until they're close. My buddy likes to dive in lakes. He said the creepiest thing, by far, is finding cemeteries 100 foot plus beneath the water in the dark. Eerie quiet. Someone just dove to the bottom of our lake to check a drain, and now he won't go back under cause he said he saw a fish that could swallow him whole. Lol, 20 plus feet long, he said. Not unexplainable, but gave the a bit of a fright. I worked as a commercial diver for about 7 years in the UK, and also some work in Europe. I was working in Orkney, north of Scotland, on the fish farms. One time I swam down one of the bigger nets off Rousay, and it was very dark, very overgrown, and I could see some weird shapes lying in the dead man's sock as I descended. There were a few more dead fish than usual, maybe 100 or so, but underneath them were lying 3 dead seals. Big ones. It was hard to make out because they were covered in fish, but one of the seals had a big fucking chunk of it missing. And that's when I looked up and saw a 4-foot tear in the side of the net. Fuck that. I was only a newbie at this point. Fish farm work is generally the best way to start a diving career. Doesn't pay the best, but you get plenty of minutes logged, which helps for experience. I told the supervisor, who said get out straight away. They sent one of the more experienced lads in after me, and he fixed the hole sharpish and then rigged the seals up to be lifted out. Turns out the seals had been killed by orca and somehow got through the net in a panic. Orca are quite common up in Orkney and are the only animal we were told you had to get out the water for if seen. Only one of the seals had a bite mark. The other 2 got caught in the net. Not supernatural or anything, but I remember a significant shiver running down my spine that day. When living off the coast, some buddies and I would take regular fishing trips out to the oil rigs. We would always have some lines out, and a few would dive down and try to spear some mangrove snapper or cobia. Once, while I and 2 others were diving down checking out the structure, we decided we needed to move due to lack of life around the rig. We all get back in the boat, and as one of my buddies is reeling in a line we had a red snapper baited on, an easily 8-10 foot tiger shark starts chewing on it right behind the prop. so close I could have poked his eye out. The idea that massive animal was in the water, so close to me and two of my friends but no one saw it is terrifying. I bet he was watching us the whole time. Edit, Grandma. I bet he was watching us the whole time. And that's why you didn't see any other fish in the area. That's what I was thinking. I witnessed something like this while diving a few years ago. My dive buddy and I were feeding a school of fish when all of a sudden poof, they're gone. I turned around to look where they ran off to, only to see a great barracuda hovering over us like a star destroyer. An old WW2 ammunition ship off the south coast of England was full of brass-topped shells. Most had been taken by divers over the years, and it was now very rare to see them, apart from a pile in one corner of the ship. This pile of shiny brass metals was miraculous unto shade, and remarkably clean. After spending years underwater, and you only found out why if you swam near them. Out of the murky darkness, the largest eel I have ever seen snakes forward. Without exaggeration, this thing had a head the same size as a horse's head, full of jagged teeth. I could not see the body as it looped into the dark and deeper into the ship. No one got near those shells. Turns out for years this thing had been guarding the shiny brass shells, slithering over them making them shine. We found out at the bar later that he was famous in the area and many people went to the wreck just to see him. No idea why this giant creature was guarding them like a dragon and its horde, but some said eels are like magpies and like shiny things. Edit, it has been pointed out it was probably a conger eel, not a moray. I'm honestly not sure as it was years ago and very dark. I have updated accordingly. I'm a commercial diver and was once on a job cleaning a potable water reservoir. I'd been in other reservoirs before, but this was by far the biggest, at 40x 80 meters. To get in you had to open a hatch in the ground. The whole reservoir was underground and climb down a ladder. The hatch was in a corner, so when you were in the far corner of the reservoir, it was completely pitch black and you just had to hope your light didn't go out. I was about halfway through a 3-hour dive when the batteries in my torch started going flat. I watched the beam get narrower and dimmer until it cut out completely. It's not a huge problem if you lose light, as you can just follow your umbilical back to the hatch. Just as I started walking back, some obnoxiously loud banging started somewhere in the reservoir. I was the only diver in there, so it both confused and scared the shit out of me. Needless to say, I ran back to the hatch as fast as I could. I ended up getting my torch changed out and doing another hour in the water, but didn't hear the noise again. I still have no idea what it was, but the combination of my torch going out and loud banging coming from somewhere gave me a hell of a fright. I've done a number of dives, and the strangest thing I ever saw was a large deep freezer with a heavy industrial chain wrapped around multiple times with about 5 cinder blocks attached. It was very rusted, and the deep freezer itself had to have been 30+ years old, probably more. This was about 90 feet deep just off Vancouver Island, Canada. The situation gave myself and the other divers the nooby-jeebies, logged the GPS and depth coordinates, and notified the police. We were able to find out what was inside, since one of the divers had friends with local police. 10 porcelain dolls. Nice work. You have unleashed them from the watery prison that was protecting us all from their off. Rescue/recovery diver here. Every time I've recovered a drowning victim I get the creeps. Unfortunately, a lot of people are under the impression that every underwater environment is like the movies, and there's absolute clarity. That's rarely the case. One evening I got called out for a young girl that jumped from a bridge. She likely survived the fall and entry. We have a morbid term for what happened to her upon hitting the water. Plugged. I found her with a surprising amount of visibility in relatively shallow water. She was stuck in the mud to just below her knees, and you could see the fear locked into her eyes/face. There's nothing peaceful about suicide by bridge. Too biggest. My buddy was taking pictures. He wanted one of me surrounded by a school of fish, so I started tossing out small pieces of hot dog. I was immediately surrounded by so many perch, I couldn't see out. All of a sudden, a largemouth bass snagged one of the pieces of hot dog that was maybe 6 inches from my face. My mask blocked his approach. Scared the crap out of me. Second one was a night dive in very silty water. Visibility was less than 3 feet. Lowest I mark, if I can't see my outstretched arm, it is 3 feet. We were near a flooded structure, maybe an old water tank, at about 35 feet. Something was flashing from our lights. Suddenly, I'm covered in something, and I couldn't see my light reflecting back. I pull it off my face, but it is still black, and I can feel it touching the top of my head. I try over and over to free myself, but I don't feel caught, just covered. Finally, I get clear. It was a large plastic trash bag. Keep your trash out of the water, please.